Hello and welcome to another whiskey review, and I think this is actually the cheapest single malt I've ever reviewed. I paid £18 for this. It's 40%, looks like it's probably chill filtered, and it's no age statement. It's not sounding great, is it? This is Crabbie's Yardhead. So Crabbies, at least if you're in the UK, is a name that has a long association with ginger beer, ginger wine, which has always been a popular mixer for whiskey. But a lot of people might not know that Crabbies, John Crabbie, actually invented the whiskey mac. And for those of you who don't know, that's equal parts Scotch whisky and ginger wine. But I would bet that a lot of people don't know that the Crabbies company has a long history in buying and selling and blending whiskey, which is why the Crabbies company is actually in the process of developing 2 single malt distilleries in Scotland of their own. But what we've got here isn't a product of either of those distilleries, because this is a sourced whisky, otherwise known as a mystery malt or a bastard malt. A lot of distilleries will source a whisky from another distillery. Sometimes it'll be a blend, sometimes a single malt, so that they've got something to sell, and in theory something that represents what they eventually want to sell under their own name, what they want to produce themselves. But anyway, that's enough about that. Let's see what we actually have in the bottle. So £18 here in the UK, 40%. How good can it be? So on the nose, as you might expect for a whiskey this cheap, it's not going to be mega old. And if you look at the colour, apart from the fact that it's incredibly clear, which would lead you to think that this is almost certainly chill filtered, it actually looks a reasonably natural colour. That looks like a reasonable colour for a fairly young bourbon matured whiskey. Not saying that there isn't a little bit of caramel colouring in there, but if there is, it's not too bad. And on the nose, as you'd expect from the colour and the age, it definitely comes across as a bourbon matured whiskey. But one thing that's definitely not is immature. You can tell that this whiskey is young. It's young and fresh and lively, but there's no immaturity. What I am getting on the nose to go along with the vanilla is lots of apple notes, and it's an entire fruit basket full of apples. You've got apple peel, fresh apple juice, sweet sugary apples, green apples. It's basically every type of apple, sweet and sugary, confectionery, vanilla. So it's a classic bourbon matured youngish whiskey, but you've also got a lot of influence from the spirit. It's not being overpowered by the bourbon casks at all. As for the taste, vanilla caramel, more apple notes, apple flavoured sweets, boiled sweets, vanilla honey, toasted malt, quite biscuity, and a little bit of sweet oak. As for the finish, I'd actually say medium long. Definitely in the medium territory and edging towards medium long on the finish of this one. It's actually much better than you'd expect for the price, or the presentation for that matter. Medium long, vanilla honey, and a little tiny hint of dry oak on the finish as well. So the big surprise with this one is that it is actually surprisingly mature. We have no idea how old this is, apart from the fact that it's at least 3 years old. If I had to hazard a guess, I would probably say that this smells and tastes, and I may be wrong, but around the 7 or 8 year mark. Of course, I could be completely wrong. It is very easy to take a quality young spirit and give it a reasonable level of maturity if you're very careful with selecting quality casks. either way, hats off to Crabbies that they've done a very good job of sourcing a quality whisky to put under their name. Judging this whisky as a young, cheap, bourbon matured whisky, the only slight criticism that I might have is that it is a little bit mild and borderline neutral at times. The flavour profile, you can actually say that it's as much defined by what's not there that you might expect as much as it is by what's actually left in. But that's also not to say that it's not got any character at all. There's lots of notes to pick up on in this whisky, and it's by no means bland. So let's not beat about the bush. I'm going to give this one a C+. And another thing that's really surprising about this whisky is that it really doesn't suffer at all for being bottled at 40%. Most whisky that's bottled at 40%, it suffers at least to some degree, especially on the palate and the finish. The nose is usually the last thing that's left intact, in my opinion, with a low-strength whisky, but the mouthfeel and the intensity of the flavour on the palate and the length of the finish all diminish quite quickly when you go down to the low 40s, but this is surprisingly intact. So for your reference at home, what whiskies would I say that this is similar to? I would say that it's very similar to Glenmorangie and quite similar to unpeated Bruichladdich as well. I'd actually say that this may actually be sourced from Glenmorangie. It's a fairly large capacity distillery that is quite widely available in supermarkets at a similar price point to the Crabbies Yardhead. And I'd say there's quite a lot of similarities between the flavour profiles of this and Glenmorangie. Now, it does say on the label that this is distilled in the Highlands, and I'm sure a lot of you will know that Glenmorangie is a Speyside distillery, but you also have to remember that Speyside distilleries are also legally allowed to call themselves Highland distilleries. Dalwhinnie does it, Macallan does it, Glenfarclas does it, and Aberlour as well call themselves Highland at times. So it's not impossible that this Crabbies Yardhead could be sourced from Glenmorangie. So I've given it a C+. Do I recommend this whisky? I would say if you like your classic bourbon matured Scotch, definitely give this one a go, especially if you like Glenmorangie or Bruichladdich. And also if you're a beginner and you're looking for something not too expensive, so don't be put off at all by the price of this one. It's actually quite a good whisky. Cheers.